We're joined by Soum, who is an IIT Kanpur graduate from 2000, and he has been a part of several tech startups based out of US, UK, and India. Along with technology, he has also pursued writing and filmmaking. And today we are discussing with him what the future journey of engineers from India is going to look like, right from the G exam to startups. Welcome to LitFestx.
Thank you, Kumar. Hello, everybody.
So, obviously, the IIT exam in India is probably the most talked about entrance exam in India, and there's an entire industry around it. There are coaching classes in Kota and the rest of the country. There's online training happening. Parents start working on their children in terms of mentally conditioning them to say, well, for so many years of your life, you need to be just focusing on getting into IIT. And where do you see this entire sort of hullabaloo, if I can call it, about getting into IIT going? Clearly there have been people who have gotten into IIT and have been successful, and clearly who've not been. So, where do you see this entire thing emerging?
Okay. Okay. So the interesting thing is that a lot of the hype that people say around IIT and engineering in general, is sort of like something that happened post millennium, the turn of the millennium. So if you look at what happened exactly, right? So like after the year 2000, around the early 2000s and stuff, we entered kind of this phase, which I call the age of globalization and age of internet. Okay, and what started happening was that the entire global markets were connected. Technology companies started like penetrating every single domain one after the other. So you take like retail, you take commerce, you take fashion, you take architecture, you take design. Everything is starting to get like affected by technology, right? Over Mark Anderson, famously said like software is eating the world, right? And if you look at US, if you look at India, that's exactly. A lot of the job pool that got created was created in this domain, and it will continue to get created like that, where essentially like you have companies which are kind of going into each and every domain. Like right now there is cab aggregation going on, right? Like Ola and Uber. And there is, for example, marketplaces like Snapdeal. And each of these things require like a tremendous, army of sort of technologists who are aware of the fundamentals of engineering, science, and computing and stuff. And so this is essentially why engineering became one of the hottest professions, and therefore every single parent wanted, like, without realizing it maybe, or without like just seeing the job pool available at that time and constantly growing job pool, they started like going after joint entrance exam, and that's how it kind of went from the time when I appeared in joint entrance was 96, it was like 1.5 lakh students, to now it's about like 10 lakh competing for JE at any point of time, and it's only going to grow.
But at a certain level, isn't this perplexing? Because the whole definition of this change, which the world of the future will see, is basis on technological revolution or innovations that will keep happening, which means that the future is about lifelong learning, whether it is in technology or business or arts or sciences, whatever it is. And so the assumption that a topper from a particular institute, whether IIT or any other institute, knows it all and can do it, is a little bit of a myth then. Right? I think what's more important is, can a person be a lifelong learner, a lifelong innovator?
So yeah, a very interesting sort of phenomenon I'd like to describe to you, right? In 1440, right, Gutenberg invented printing press, right, and commercialized it. By 1500, there were about 1,000 printing press across Europe that were there, and like 8 million books were in print, right? So, but that's like about 60 years of time that it took for sort of spread of printing press around. Look at what happened after smartphone, right? So 2000 came up with iPhone, and now we are like more than 2 billion smartphones in the world. That's like 1/4 of the world population using smartphones. And this happened within a span of like 8 years or so, right? Now, in this kind of shift that we are undergoing right now, it's just the world we live in, and fortunately, or unfortunately, I actually think it's a beneficial thing. But that the skills that one learns in engineering is not just sort of superficial skills are not enough to continue to survive and just kind of you have to constantly adapt and learn. And this is the perplexity of the world we live in, unfortunately. But the fortunate thing about it is that it also keeps it exciting, and you're constantly part of like a cycle of change and participant, right?
And how do you compare this with, let's say, China, which is again, the world's largest population? Clearly, even they are, making huge strides in the area of technology. Technology workers. How do you see the numbers stack up between India and China?
So, a fascinating thing that happens in China is this exam called Gaokao, right? And so we talk about joint entrance, which is like a million students who appear every year and one of the toughest exams. Gaokao is the prerequisite for engineering entrance in China, and in Gaokao about 9 million students appear. Right? So it's like 9 times or 10 times more than how many the students who are appearing for joint entrance. And the pressures are enormous. So they call it the pressure cooker exam. There is a sort of phenomenon of people trying to cheat, and they have like drones which try to kind of detect if people are cheating or not, and all sorts of push and pull kind of mechanics happen at this time. An average student studies about 17 hours a day for years to kind of make sure that they get through, right. And there have been criticisms about this exam because the criticism is that it requires too much of cramming and rote learning, and it kills creativity, it kills the ability to innovate and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is that if that is the way a student kind of gets into a career, that's what's going to happen. Joint entrance is also there are parallels to joint entrance and Gaokao, I think. And interestingly, what is happening is that China is now becoming the leader in technological innovation very, very rapidly. So if you look at Alibaba and what happened, Alibaba kind of went and IPO'd and now is like giving everybody a run for the money. And then there is this platform called WeChat, which China is like, enormously popular in China, like something like 700 million users or something on that. And they are also growing rapidly and stuff. And WhatsApp is competing with WeChat. So it's like a push and pull happening right now in the world. And so India is also not far behind with like companies which are kind of playing in the global arena right now. So it's a fascinating time that we live in. And for a engineering graduate, there couldn't have been a better time actually, because of the amount of this competition actually leads to more and more innovation and more companies coming forth, and therefore creating more jobs and therefore creating a better space for people to kind of thrive.
You know,
But the advantage I think that we have in a certain way is the language, which is they're trying to rectify that by putting English language as a prerequisite. And a lot of I have been to China and I've met people who have asked me to talk to them in English so that they can train their English better. But the edge that we have, which is why we kind of at the early starters also, is the language.
When you talk about it being a good time for engineering graduates, what is your sense today? People who are applying for the joint entrant exam, is the motivation to say I want to get into a top-notch institute, pass out, and then just get a good job? Where's my $100,000 job? Or is it also to say I want to become a great engineer and go out and innovate?
So the fascinating thing is, once upon a time, at the time when I graduated, these skills, there were certain skills which were really sought after. The ability to create a web page, if you remember early 2000, was like one of the most coveted skills at that time, and everybody was like after PHP developers, or for example, somebody who could put together a web page was like essentially like really sought after. Look at the shift as what has happened, right? Now the biggest skills are around like what is data, big data, machine intelligence. How to create like mobile interfaces which can use sensors to come up with things, fitness devices, which are like tracking constantly your motion, your heartbeat, and stuff like that. Right? This kind of is a shift in what the world requires from technologists right now. Right? It just demonstrates that it is no longer enough to be like at the level where you're just shallow in the skill set, but it's like you have to go deeper. Now the good thing about this though is that the fundamentals do not change. What happened from 1960 onwards in theory of computing and technology and all these fundamental principles like laws of physics have not changed since then. The current day that we are entering, current age we are entering is called the age of machine intelligence. I think like, so we are using Siri, we are using like all these apps, which are chatbots, which are answering our questions, acting almost as if they're humans. But the fundamentals of how they work have been present for a long time. It's just that the technology has kind of caught up and hardware has caught up to be able to kind of create these kind of, systems now. So if a engineer is to go in and sort of say that I'm going to focus on the fundamentals, then that fundamental remains true, no matter how the shift happens in the world. Those haven't changed at all. What has changed is the interfaces which kind of, we are using right now. Tomorrow there will be virtual reality, augmented reality. Pokemon Go right now, that is becoming the biggest fad. Mixed reality. These interfaces will change, but the core crux of what happens underneath it does not change that much. So I believe it's, the focus for an engineer should be to just go deeper into the fundamentals, almost like laws of physics, does not change. Go into a lot of computing, law of the sciences, core sciences more and more.
Right. You know, very interestingly, when we talk about the the rapid change happening in society, the technology that needs to catch up, or in certain cases, technology is bringing about the change. Both of those are happening. Has there been any kind of movement or research or thinking to say that can IITians really, as a body, as a group, bring about massive change for India, right? So yes, we know of phenomenal stories of IITians working in India and abroad in the top companies, top tech companies, whether hardware, software, app development, so on and so forth. But we have yet to see that mind-boggling hardware or software product come out of India, developed by a bunch of IITians, which, honestly, in a 50, 60-year horizon has still not happened. And so, what do you think is
So,
lacking? I mean, we have the money, so we have a vibrant venture capital, private equity industry now in India. We have appreciation for talent, right? So the world over, people understand that IIT grads are smart and bright and intelligent. Our domestic IT industry has proven to the world and to consumers, to the media, to investors that we can service the best technology worldwide. So, what do you think is holding people back? Why is it that we don't see a group of IITians coming together with a single-minded focus, saying, forget about commercialization in the short term or not. We are out there to prove a point. We will create something which will dominate the world in a specific niche of technology.
let me answer that in like the three different ways actually. So first is, that when I was writing my book, Copper Prepares, and I kind of went and interviewed a whole bunch of students in IIT, I came with the same kind of notion that, a lot of fundamental innovation does not really happen here. But I was completely wrong actually. One of the students, like several of the students I met, one of the students I met, for example, was from IIT Madras and IIT Chennai, and what he was doing was that he created this device which could track potholes on the road by the sudden jerk that happens in the car. You just kind of place this device in the car, and it will map and create an entire mapping of where are the potholes in the city. Right. Another student had created a standing wheelchair where because wheelchairs are normally sort of rolling move. So the person who is disabled needs something that they can actually walk around with as well as sit on. This student had created as a student project a standing wheelchair. Another one had created a swimming pool lift for disabled people, right? Somebody else had created low power internet, access points that are, that can be used in rural locations and stuff. I feel like a lot of the innovation that happens right now does not get highlighted at all. And media does a terrible job of that actually, because if you look at the amount of focus we have on celebrity and politics right now, and almost close to zero focus towards science and innovation and stuff, that I think gives this perception that a lot of the innovation is actually not happening. So that's number one. Number two, if you look at what happened, India is not very licensed. Raj was there until 1990s, right? So as a technologist, if you have to acquire any gadget before 1990, you literally have to go through a whole bunch of documentation and they'll pay a huge amount of duty and stuff to actually even be able to do anything that the rest of the world has access to, right? Even now, that kind of continues to be the case where if I had to access like a gadget which is available to technologists in the US, I won't be able to get it right now. This leads to us not having the cutting edge of technology which everybody else has, and yet so sort of like technological innovation sort of slightly lags behind because of that. But it's catching up very rapidly. So some of the startups I interviewed for my coming book on startups right now, which called Cracking the Chaos, tentatively called Cracking the Chaos, the title may change, but are working on energy. There is this team Indus which is trying to send a spaceship out, right? So there are a lot of these kind of startups which are doing really, really cutting edge stuff. Mangalyaan itself is a beautiful example of how innovative our technology is right now. Actually. So I think that if you look at the curve of when the innovation cycle started in the US and access to innovation was there in 1970s, 60s, whereas we only started getting access to proper devices like from late 90s and to early 2000s. Even at IIT, when I was doing my own project, I had access to one black and white camera, which was one frame per second, like it was just one frame after the other, and I was supposed to do image processing on that. Impossible, right? It's like, how do you actually do anything with it? There's a third point to this, which is that we have a very dynamic economic sort of setup right now, and which is very, very deep and multi-layered, right? So it's like there is already taxis, which were doing businesses, real estate brokers doing businesses, retail doing businesses. And the first level of penetration that always happens with technology, I feel, is when they try to impact that, right? So you sort of do operational innovation rather than technological innovation. Technological innovation is a side effect of operational innovation.
Right. No, very well put, Som. In terms of your own career, well, you've been, dabbling in startups, filmmaking. You're writing novels. Sorry, you're writing books. Tell us how your time and your experience with this has been straddling these, three different worlds.